Well, hey, everybody, thanks for joining me again for another in this series of meeting with CEOs and founders of cybersecurity companies. Today, I'm very excited to introduce Russ Spitler. Russ was brought to the network through a referral from a member who said, I love this technology. I think other members will love it. And it's turned out very much so as you've hit the trail with us this final series, Russ. So Russ is in Austin, Texas today, right next to where Andy lives. Matter of fact, that's how this kind of thing sort of kicked off. Russ, you are the CEO and co-founder, and I know you have an interesting history as well in this space. So, just start off with what inspired you to get involved and do a startup like this in the cyberspace where there's 5,000 companies. What inspired you to move forward with it?
Yeah, well, Bill, first of all, thank you for having a chance to talk with you today. Certainly, as we think about nudge security and sort of the founding story behind it, I think the unsexy answer is, well, this is my career. I've been building cybersecurity companies since I got out of college with Fortify Software, then AlienVault after that, and I didn't really have the imagination to go far afield. But as it comes to actual nudge and the problem that we solve at Nudge. What I did was I sat down with the smartest guy in security I knew at the end of my time at AT&T, which bought my last company. And that man now is my co-founder. And we just started discussing where are the areas of emerging risk where the security investment doesn't reflect the threat landscape.
Ah,
And it took us about 5 minutes to start talking about SaaS services. And when we get into that SaaS ecosystem, what we quickly realized is it is not because SaaS is wholly unique and different, but rather the complicating factors of how technology is adopted in organizations today means that we need to come up with new paths and approaches for managing third-party risk, identity governance, data security within this new deployment model, much like we had to reimagine how we delivered and secured workloads in the sort of public cloud. We have the same challenge ahead of us when it comes to the sort of the IT and the operational infrastructure that runs our business in the SaaS ecosystem.
yeah, I mean, so this is so interesting because SaaS has just hit the scene so hard. Obviously, we just finished our roundtable series on cloud, SaaS, and AI. I call it the recipe for disaster. And you guys came in and talked about how you're making that recipe work better with your solution. But it is interesting how you adapted to a space that was growing so quickly and were able to get a solution out so quickly. And I think that's impressive. So, which kind of leads into my next question, which is what makes the nudge security solution unique? There are, again, 4,000, 5,000 companies in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. The experience that I've had building the sort of past companies that I was a part of made me really focus and recognize is how can we expedite that time to value for the customer? And I'm sure almost every one of your members has experienced the, click here to request a time to book a demo, which kicks off like, 1,400 sales calls before you actually get to touch technology, right? And so in a very different approach, you can sign up and start using our product without ever talking to us or giving us a credit card or anything like that. You use the technology. And that time to value is something that we really focus from a technology perspective, which is with a single point of integration, we can give you historical analysis of what SaaS accounts and SaaS apps your employees are using. And we can produce that analysis in about an hour. And we really focused on that time to value as one of the primary drivers during our early development because so many organizations tackle this problem by starting with, hey, give me API access to Salesforce and Zoom and GitHub and all these other things around your organization. And the security team
Wow.
sitting there saying it's going to take me 3 months to figure out how to get there, as opposed to a product where I can deploy and get you to the point where you're seeing something and actually reducing risk within a few hours of use.
Yeah, it's so interesting in this series that we just completed and in which you participated. So many members said what I thought they would say. There's much more SaaS happening than I'm aware of. And that's the thing you highlight for them.
One of the things that our company can do is identify who introduces the technology to your organization. And what we find in organizations is 90% of the SaaS applications in use are introduced by people outside the IT and
Side of
security
IT, right? So the
organization.
whole
Yep.
shadow thing, right?
Without a doubt. Now, however you want to chalk up sanctioning of applications, usually I use by like what's an SSO is kind of like the sanction list. Maybe there's some float above
Mhm.
that for the things that don't support it. But that usually sort of tops out around 30 to 40% of the applications within the organization. So
Wow.
you have not only a good chunk of things that have not gone through that sort of legal and security review, but are likely not being actively managed, even at the basic sense of identity management.
Right.
And you have a huge challenge when every day you show up at work, there's nine things coming in from the field and one thing coming from your team, right?
Yeah. So, in addition to time to value, which is, I think is so critical, that you can say, look, a lot of vendors say this, but we can deliver this. Turn us on, and right away, your visibility increases immensely, and you can start lowering risk. How do you sort of cut through what I call the noise in this space? I would deal with some of these 5,000 vendors in the cybersecurity space, and they all try to deliver a message and get some time with a decision maker. What do you do to cut through the noise?
Well, on two fronts. One goes back to that time to value and that self-service product experience, which is so much of the noise in this space is like, let me beat my chest until you meet with the sales guy, and then I'll like, again, kick off that sales process. If I can just give you access to the product, that gives you practical experience. We also put our product front and center on the website. And you can't get very far on our website without seeing some sort of click-through demo or some example of how we can deliver that value. And I believe very strongly in that sort of product first experience, particularly with the cybersecurity buyer, because so much of our experience is about promises that come in the future after lengthy deployments. And I really want to make sure that that experience is up front. And then the second piece that we really focus on is how can we slant our tone of our brand towards educational content and educational conversation, which
Yeah.
is we have more than 150 blog posts we've written over the last 2 years, which is a lot when you have to sit there and write it. And we don't use like AI to write it. This is the human sitting there. And it covers topics that like aren't necessarily 100% relevant to like the products
Hmm.
solution that we can, the problems in the product solution that we can address today. And
Yeah.
and the intent of that is like, how do I help educate? How do we share the expertise that's on my team with the broader market? How do we create those meaningful relationships in a manner that ultimately, fosters an interest to come back and talk to us about things that we can solve when the time comes?
Yeah, and I think that's so important. That's key to success in our network is when sponsors come to the table and say, I'd love you to buy my thing, but I'm going to educate you about solving the risk problem in general. So if I come in and we just talk about how you're tackling anything in cybersecurity and you've improved, great, good on both of us. Buy my stuff later, maybe never, but we've established a trusted relationship. So I think that's important. You'll be successful with our members then. That's great. Um, Without using a client name, obviously most clients don't want to be referenced, but is there a case study maybe you could share with us where your solution came in and very quickly solved a problem, made life better in some way?
Yeah, so I'll give you a couple of just really quick anecdotal examples. One was a large cloud-based data warehouse company. I think they've since moved on from that positioning, but that's probably the easiest way to describe them. Their CISO called me up and said, "Hey, the audit committee just gave me the riot act because I need to know which of my employees are using generative AI solutions." This was a little over a year ago.
Mhm.
And they had every network solution under the sun, right? It was well-established program, enterprise browsers, DLP agents on their endpoints, network, proxies. But he said, I can tell you how much traffic's going where, I can tell you how many sessions are out there, but I can't tell you who's using what.
Wow.
And within 24 hours of deploying our solution, we could, say, hey, here's the 21% of your organization, and that was 21% across almost every single department in the organization that have actively signed up for a generative AI service. Here are the 300 who are paying for those services. Here are the 30 who have issued developer API keys for those services. Here are the three that lost those developer API keys on GitHub. And that turned it from this giant volume of sort of, loose telemetry as to what was going on down to a very actionable set of data for them to start moving forward. That was the entire success objective for a 2-month POC. We achieved it within 24 hours, and they've been a great partner as we've evolved the product.
Yeah, that's a great case study, right? And I think obviously one of the side benefits for your solution is if I can see who all's paying for maybe non-sanctioned SaaS of any kind is maybe I save the company money and go back to the business heads and go, did you know that your department's spending $50,000 a month on things that aren't sanctioned?
So this is a more recent capability that we've introduced, but we can automatically detect from billing events that go on how much people are spending on these services. One great win recently, we deployed with an organization and they found they're spending $15,000 on a calendar scheduling app. And this was not, a $15,000 invoice from the app. This was more than 100, I think it was 120 employees with $10 a month
Yep.
subscriptions, all independently subscribing to this
Right.
app,
All
which
probably, and then giving that back to the company for reimbursement in some way. Hey, pull it all together, do one universal contract and save some money.
will save some money, or
Can it?
Microsoft has that built in these days. Maybe not spend the
Right.
15 grand. We'll all go to lunch and be 10 grand ahead, right?
Yeah, and that's a huge win for any CISO that we've discovered in our membership is if I can go to the business and say, I can save you money. I'm not always going to ask you for money. I can save you
Absolutely.
money in a couple things that we're doing. So that's a phenomenal case study. I appreciate it. Um, Speaking of AI, and you said that, one of your cases is looking at generative AI. Obviously, it's become important to CISOs that their solutions that they're purchasing, like yours, have some AI behind the scenes, making it more efficient and effective. Have you incorporated AI? Is it part of something or will it be in the future?
My co-founder is probably about as forward thinking on this particular subject as you can find. He has had a very pragmatic approach to how we embrace generative AI in its various forms. And the critical piece is that that pragmatic approach is also balanced with the fact that he's about the most paranoid security person that I've ever met. So what we have done is we've really found some very constructive ways to introduce generative AI in places in our product that doesn't require it to have access to our customers' data,
Mhm.
but substantially increases the value we can deliver to those customers. As a very explicit example, we now have 140,000 profiles of the security programs of different SaaS vendors, which first and foremost, like there's 140,000 SaaS vendors out there that we know about, like it's a huge amount. But the second piece is if you think about even just sort of the basics of how you might generated that 5 years ago, I would have had to have an army of interns working for like 4 years in order to just enumerate those 140,000 such, much less get to the point where like I have the headquarters, I know how many employees they have, I know what their SOC 2 certification status is, what their bug bounty programs are, what their, SaaS supply chain looks like. And that wealth of information is only possible because of some of the automation and interaction that we've been able to use, some very
Right.
interesting AI agents to drive.
Well, that's going to be another line of revenue for you. I can think of other companies who, not necessarily competitive, but would want access to that and pay a subscription to it. I'm sure you've already thought about it. So, well, that's very interesting use of AI. And I appreciate you being so honest about how you're using it. And a lot of companies are afraid to talk about how they're using AI with client data for obvious reasons. So, well, we come to our last question. It's one of my favorite. It is, if you had a peer, and I'm sure you do, if you have a peer in the space who said, "Hey, look, I'm going to fire up a cybersecurity company. One's born every minute, right? And there's plenty of room in the space. It's a little crowded, but what would be your advice? What's the key thing that new cybersecurity startups should think about?"
I've been fortunate enough to be in this position, and I always have the same advice, which is the first thing you should do before you start to write a line of code is go talk to 100 customers.
Yeah.
And the evolution and the maturation of your understanding of the problem will exponentially increase as you go through that sort of burn down of 100 conversations. And the amount of time that you end up saving
Oh
of
God.
effort that you would have put into dead ends, or things that you think are the problem but people aren't willing to pay to solve, those challenges really diminish very quickly once you actually effectively engage in the
Yep.
broader world and you get outside of your closet like I am here today and start interacting with people and understand what their day-to-day challenges are.
Yeah. It's the best piece of advice I hear from your peers as I've done this series of interviews is understand the market, know the customer, spend time with them. Don't write any code yet. Yeah, I know our friends over at CyberStarts, very similar. They tell all of their potential investors, right? Hey, look, Don't write any code. Go out with your thesis, go to the market, and then come back to us, and then we'll see about whether we're going to fund you or not. So you've obviously done all the right things there. I think your product is on just a meteoric rise. Our members are fascinated by it, and so thank you for coming to speak to our members about it. We hope that we'll see you back again next year. So Russ, thanks again for your time. I know you're an incredibly busy person, but you're on a great trajectory. We're excited to have introduced your solution to our members. Thanks for your time today. Members, again, Russ Spitler over at Nudge Security. If you're not familiar with their solution, please go to their website, look them up. And Russ, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Bill. Appreciate the time.